Everyone, I'm Tina May and we are going to learn about Intro to Web Development today. We're going to look at what is coding, what coding means, what a coding language is, the difference between front-end and back-end, what a website is, HTML, CSS and JavaScript and their roles within a website. We'll look at frameworks and content management systems and themes and plugins, hosting and domain names. So there's a lot of terminology in there that you may or may not have heard of. We're going to demystify all of this so that you can get started with your web development journey, having an understanding of what the big picture is and how your new skills will fit in with the rest of the ecosystem. So what is coding? Coding is simply a set of instructions that are written in a language that computers can understand. So we want to be able to use computers to undergo a range of tasks and functions. We want them to be able to display websites and run apps. But to communicate with the computers, we need to just write our instructions for them in a really specific way. So to do that, we have a specific syntax when we're writing instructions. So on the left-hand side here, we've got a little example. This is some HTML code, and it's telling the browser first to create a H1 heading, then to create a paragraph, and then to create a link that goes to Google. Now, don't worry about the specifics of this. We're going to get into that in the next lesson. What's important is just seeing that it's not some big, scary thing. The basics of coding can actually be reasonably simple, and we're just writing in a set way that the browser can then interpret. It can be surprisingly simple, or it can be very complex, depending on the application. And there's lots of different coding languages that each have their own purpose, their own syntax, and their own semantics. So let's have a look at some of the different coding languages that you might have heard of. HTML creates a structure of websites and apps. CSS is used to style websites and apps. Java is used to build desktop apps. JavaScript adds interactivity to websites and apps. And fun fact, JavaScript and Java are completely unrelated. When the team of developers was creating JavaScript, Java was a really popular programming language or coding language. And so they thought, hey, how can we get quicker popularity for our new programming language? Let's just call it JavaScript and we'll piggyback on the popularity of this existing language. So even though they have nothing to do with each other, they're not really similar at all, they just piggybacked on the name. Then you've got things like Ruby. You might have heard of Ruby. C is used in embedded systems, cars, electronics, other devices. Python is often used in artificial intelligence and robotics and cybersecurity. And PHP is used in dynamic websites, so it powers sites like Facebook and WordPress. Now, each of these languages has their own syntax, and that means their own set way of being written. So just like in spoken languages, we have a set sentence structure when we're speaking in English. We use specific punctuation when we're writing in Spanish. Coding languages are the same. They each have their own grammatical rules and syntax in how you have to communicate in those languages. Now, I know this first lesson can feel a little dry, and we're going to get to the fun stuff soon, I promise, but learning to talk the talk and understanding key terminology is still really important. Whether you want to pursue a career as a web developer or you're looking to have a bit of a side hustle, building websites for friends and family, or maybe you're looking to manage a tech team, for example, or manage a set of developers, being able to have informed conversations and understand just what people are talking about, even if you don't understand, how to write in a particular programming language, you're still able to understand what someone's talking about. So bear with me, and I promise we'll get to the fun stuff soon. Okay, you may have heard of front end and back end. Front-end development deals with the part of the web that you see and interact with. And web development is kind of a subset of front-end development. With web development, we're just building websites. With front-end development, you could also be creating the interactive part, the part that you see and feel of apps as well as websites. Then back-end development handles all the behind-the-scenes technology that powers apps and databases and servers. Not every website has a back-end. So if you're creating a simple website for maybe your friend's cafe, you probably don't need to have a back-end. If you want to build the next, Google Documents or Netflix or a search engine, anything that has something going on behind the scenes, that's where back-end development comes into play. And there's different coding languages typically that we would use for each one. So front-end development deals a lot in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Back-end development covers a lot of other languages, including PHP, Ruby, Java, Python. Now, a website. That's what we're all here to learn, but what does that actually mean? So a website is just a folder of text documents written in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, along with some images and videos and other assets that give instructions to a browser about how to build the website. So when we're creating the code of a website, it doesn't look like the finished product that we would see in a browser. It looks like a whole heap of instructions, and we'll look at that in a minute. And the browser's job then is to read through each of the text files, read through the HTML, the CSS, the JavaScript, listen to those instructions and render or draw or paint the website in the browser. So while the website itself is just a collection of these files, a folder on your desktop or somewhere on your computer, to access it online, it needs to be hosted. And hosting is like the digital real estate in the cloud. That's where we put our website so that people can access it from all over the world. If we had the website files just on our computer, it's still technically a website, but it's not accessible to anyone. So when we think of a website, we typically refer to one that's already being hosted in the cloud. Then for people to be able to find it, the website, we need to connect it to a domain name. And a domain name is like the online address that helps people navigate to your specific website online. This is a bit of a visual representation. So on the left-hand side, we've got our website folder. And that might contain things like your index.html, that's your home page. Maybe it has another page for about and contact. We've got a logo.jpg. We probably have some other images as well, but to keep it simple. And we might have a style sheet, style.css. We take that folder of text, files, and images, and we host it in the cloud. Now, hosting may seem like a foreign concept, but if you imagine Google Drive or Dropbox, these are hosting files on the internet. The fact that you can access them from anywhere means that they're hosted in the cloud. Now, website hosting obviously functions a little bit differently. We don't use Google Drive or Dropbox to host our website, but it's the same concept. It's that digital real estate in the cloud. Then we connect a domain name, and the domain name is saying, hey, when you type in www.instituteofcode.com, I want you to navigate to this specific space on the internet, this specific piece of digital real estate in the cloud, and that's where you will find this collection of files. Now, for each step of the process, we are often using different kind of tools and applications. So to start with, when we create our website, we're probably using a code editor. Now, a code editor is just a text editor that formats things in a really easy to understand way. So we'll have a look at that in the next lesson. But when we're typing out our HTML and our CSS code, a code editor will color code things to make it really, really easy to read. We then take that collection of files and we host it online. Now, the hosting provider we're going to be showing you is Netlify, and we use it because it's fast, reliable, and free. So you don't have to pay anything for small websites. They operate on a freemium model. So, if you build The next, Facebook, you're obviously going to have to pay for hosting, but for small sites, they offer it completely free and really, really fast and reliable. So that's the one we recommend. Then you connect your custom domain name. And sometimes you can use the same company for hosting and domain names. GoDaddy, for example, offers both hosting and domain names, but since we're getting hosting for free, we're probably going to buy our domain name separately. So for the domain name, we could use Google Domains. That's great for .com domains and people living in America. For everyone else, GoDaddy is our preferred option. That's what we use at Institute of Code. To be honest, most of them do roughly the same thing. So if you've already bought a domain somewhere else, that's totally fine. Okay, this is my favorite analogy for people who are just getting started. We're going to look at the different roles HTML, CSS, and JavaScript play if a website were a house. HTML would be the house's structure. It would determine how many rooms the house had, which were bathrooms, which were bedrooms, how many doors and windows, etc. CSS would be the house's unique style. So it would determine the height of the rooms, the position of the windows, the color of the walls, everything that affects the look and feel of the house. JavaScript would be the house's smart features, so that would power all of the interactivity, like the spotlight that turns on when you walk past your garage door, or the garage door that opens when you press a button. So in terms of the actual website functions then, HTML creates the structure of websites and apps. So you tell the browser how many pages you want and what elements you want on those pages, headings, paragraphs, links, sections, etc. Every single element that's on the page was put there with HTML. CSS then is used to style those elements. So CSS doesn't create anything new, it just takes the existing elements, the headings, the paragraphs, the links, and it applies the style. So it might say, make the headings bold, make the background red, position this image on the right-hand side, add some space around something. It's all of the look and feel of a website. Now, those first two are kind of a prerequisite for every single website. JavaScript is used in most websites, but it's not necessarily a requirement. JavaScript adds interactivity. So this includes things like a pop-up, or if you want to have a hamburger menu that you click on mobile and it pops out and hides again, or a slideshow, a gallery that zooms in when you click on something. Anything that has like a deeper level of interactivity, it's not just being displayed on the page, is probably controlled with JavaScript. A website that's just using HTML and CSS is kind of more like a magazine. It may interact a little bit, you can click through to different sections, but by and large what you see is what you get on every different browser, and there's not a lot of interactivity with the user. Whereas once you add JavaScript, you just have a little bit more power to create interactivity, to change the look and feel and the what's happening as you're interacting. So maybe you have a really small image on the site, but then when you click on it, it zooms into a big lightbox gallery. That's what we can do with JavaScript. So here's an example. This is the Institute of Code Web Dev Bootcamp page for our 10-day course in Bali. On the top, you see it, just a screenshot of what it looks like normally. On the bottom, you see what it looks like if I disable all the CSS. So all of the contents are still there. We've still got this full navigation down here. All of our links are there. We've got our title, we've got our social media links, etc. But what's different is obviously the styling. Here at the top, we're able to have beautiful images. It's all the fonts are styled. Some things only appear once you hover over them. We're obviously pretty restricted with what we can do only with HTML, but it does form the backbone of every website. So we need to learn HTML before we can learn anything else. All right, frameworks. Now, frameworks are a tool that is going to make our web development process faster. And the reason they do that is that, let's say if you wanted to create something like a gallery or a simple website, it's probably going to have a lot of common pieces. It might have a header and a footer and buttons and an accordion and a slider and a gallery. Now, you could code all of those things from scratch yourself, but each website you created, there'd probably be a lot of similarities. What frameworks do is they pre-write common sets of code for you so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel, so that you can leverage those commonalities and kind of fast track your development process. Now, there's frameworks for lots of different programming languages. You may have heard of some of these. We've got Ruby on Rails. So Ruby is the programming language. Rails is a framework for Ruby that takes common programming tasks, common sets of code, and pre-writes them for you. We've got Bootstrap for HTML and CSS. We've got Gridlex, which is one that we're actually going to teach you that lets you quickly and easily create grid layouts. Now, it doesn't do anything you couldn't do yourself in HTML and CSS, but it saves you a lot of time. If you were to normally create, 3 columns and 2 columns and 6 columns, and you had to write all of that code out yourself, it may be quite time consuming. Whereas with a framework, they've already done the hard work for you in that kind of generic sets of code, so it just fast tracks your development. We teach jQuery instead of JavaScript because jQuery has a lot of pre-written functions that are faster to use than JavaScript for someone who's just starting out. There's actually a lot of frameworks for JavaScript. They all have slightly different purposes or benefits to them. Angular is used for a lot of web apps. You've got React, you've got ASP.NET for C, and you've got Django for Python. Okay, so we've got the code of the website. We've written a website in HTML and CSS, maybe a little bit of JavaScript, but we probably need somebody else to be able to manage the site that's not technical, that doesn't understand how to code. And that's where a content management system comes in. A content management system, or CMS, is a piece of software that allows non-technical users to edit the content of the website without having to write or edit the code. It's like the visual interface to edit those text files that make up the website. So WordPress is an example. Joomla is another one you might have heard of. Forestry, Cloud Cannon is the one that we teach. So let's have a look at what that looks like. So this website is still written in code. It's still written in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. But to edit the content of that HTML, and sometimes the CSS, we can use an editor. So here we've got the WordPress editor. We can make something bold or underlined. We can write new text. We can create lists, etc. And most websites need to be integrated with a content management system so that non-technical users can edit them. Cloud Cannon is the main one that we teach. So you can see it's got an in-context editor. I love this for clients because it's so easy and straightforward for them. They can immediately see the changes that they're making to their website. And it's just restrictive enough that they don't accidentally break things. I find sometimes when they're using the editor in WordPress, we call it the WYSIWYG editor, this one, that sometimes they can break some of the styles or the code that I've written. So I really like Cloud Cannon for how easy and simple it is. Here's another screenshot of the Cloud Cannon editor. So you can see beyond that in-context editor, sometimes we need to do more traditional things. Like here, they're adding additional staff members with cat photos. They're changing the background color, etc. So Cloud Cannon I like because it's just so straightforward to use. It's very, very intuitive. You don't need any technical experience to be able to edit and update a site. So my clients tend to love Cloud Cannon. Then you've got Forestry. It's quite similar. Forestry is great because it's totally free and it's still really easy to use. So content management system, CMS, just allow non-technical users to edit the website. They're not instead of coding. There are some content management systems that include pre-written themes, but that theme is still created in code. The theme is the pre-coded website. So it's still written in HTML, CSS, JavaScript, depending on the content management system. It may also have another language, like if you build a website for WordPress, you need to write in PHP code as well. For Cloud Canon and Forestry, you can just write in HTML and CSS, which is another one of the reasons why we use them. And a theme just means someone has pre-coded the website for you. People ask me all the time, is a theme good or bad? And that's kind of like asking, is a house well built? It obviously depends on who built the house, on what kind of materials they used, on how talented and qualified they were. There are some great themes out there that are really well written, they're high quality code, they're optimized for search engines, etc. There are also themes that are really, really poor quality. And the challenge is for someone who doesn't understand the code that they're trying to evaluate, it can be a little bit tricky to understand and separate one from the other. The other challenge with themes is you obviously want to have a website that is tailor-made for your brand, that is your 24-hour salesman, it perfectly represents your company, and that can be a little bit tricky to do with a WordPress theme. Pause here for a second because I have to turn music off. A plugin it's similar to a theme, it's similar to a framework. A plugin, though, is a specific feature or element that's been pre-coded. So, for example, on the Institute of Code website, we use a plugin for our Instagram widget. So the Instagram banner that automatically displays our up-to-date Instagram feed at the bottom, that's a pre-coded plugin. And the reason we do that is sometimes it already exists out there in such a well-coded way that it's just not worth building yourself. So there are plugins that we can use to add extra functionality to our website without having to completely create them ourselves. Myth busting. I see this all the time. People think they're choosing between a coded website and a WordPress website or a Squarespace theme. No matter what content management system is being used, the site is still built in HTML and CSS code. It may be well built, it may be poorly built, you may not ever see the code, but it's still using that code. So these skills that you're going to learn over the next 10 days, they're applicable even if you never want to build your own website from scratch. If you already have a WordPress site or a Squarespace site, and you just want to be able to go in and tweak things, this is going to give you more flexibility in making those changes than if you were just relying on the options available in your theme or plugin. Okay, when you're building a website for a content management system, you need to keep in mind which content management system you want to use and how easy that will be to edit. So for some content management systems, the integration process of taking your HTML and CSS code and making it editable through that editor is very quick and easy. So moving from one to another would be simple. If I built a site for Cloud Canon, I can build the site in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and it'll take me only a few minutes to integrate with Cloud Canon. On the other hand, if I was building a site that I wanted for WordPress, I really need to start with that in mind or allow plenty of time for the custom integration. So I take my HTML and CSS and I still need to build it around the WordPress core using PHP. It's just something to keep in mind. You can't really easily take, say, a WordPress theme and then move it to another content management system, whereas you can usually take a custom-built site and move it to WordPress in the future if you wanted to. So in that way, there's maybe a little bit more flexibility in custom-built sites. Okay, let's recap. Coding is just writing instructions that a computer can understand. And coding languages are the specific syntax, a specific set of phrases and grammar and symbols that we use to communicate in that language. Front end is the part of the web that we can see and interact with. It's like the storefront, whereas back end is all the behind the scenes technology. It's not the shop front that you're going to, it's the bakery or the manufacturing. It's what's happening behind the scenes. A website is just a collection of text files stored in a website folder that's hosted on the internet and then connected to a unique domain name so that you can find it. Frameworks, themes, and plugins are all kind of similar. There's a bit of a murky line distinguishing which one is a framework and which one is a plugin, but they're all sets of pre-written code, with a theme being a completely pre-written website, a framework being a set of pre-written code for specific tasks. Typically, so for Gridlex, the one that we'll be using, that's to create custom grids. For something like Rails for Ruby, it has a lot of different common functions and it's just fast tracking that development process. Plugins then are similar to both, but they tend to be on a smaller scale. A plugin usually has one specific task. It's a gallery plugin, it's a pop-up plugin, it's an Instagram widget. Then finally, we've got hosting and domain names. And hosting, if you remember, is like our digital real estate in the cloud. And a domain name is the unique URL that navigates to that location. So someone types in the domain name, they navigate to the cloud storage, to that specific digital real estate where they can see the website files, and then the browser takes that set of text files and renders it or paints it into a visual website. That's it for today, guys. Tomorrow's lesson, we're going to dig into what HTML is and how we can start writing it.